Hey, and welcome to my trigger-proof transmission. Please make sure you subscribe to this channel by smashing that subscribe button. And if you wait until the end, I will show you how to get access to my masterclass or workshop called Should I Stay or Go? Powerful training that helps you make the 5 transitions required to know the answer to should I stay, should I go, and heal these repetitive patterns without years of counseling or psychotherapy. Hello, good evening, good morning. Welcome to another trigger-proof transmission. I am your humble servant, Dr. Nima Rahmany, working on becoming more humble, to be honest with you. I'd be lying if I said that I led with humility all of my life. I'm actually in recovery from that, which is interesting because we're talking about narcissists today. Here we are talking about why there are so many narcissists, and I'm like, I'm your humble servant here, completely putting on my inner Kanye narcissist hat for you. Well, wouldn't that be a lot more fitting for me to put on my narcissist cap for you to answer the question why there are so many narcissists out there? Um, and today's transmission has been inspired by some of the questions from our trigger-proof community. Now it's, holy crap, it's almost 6,000 people. Started it a year ago. Was doing consistent Facebook Lives like twice a day to help people through the pandemic, get you regulating your nervous system, feeling a little bit more calm as we navigated the unknown every day, one bad news after another. Remember how scary that was last year? People lining up for toilet paper. I was in lockdown after I came back from my trip to Thailand. Pregnant fiance. And I'm here alone, away from my pregnant fiance after I got back from Thailand. And I was like, holy cow, what do I do with all this time and all of this uncertainty? I decided to create this Facebook group where I dropped in every day, at least twice a day, so that I could, just my presence with the awareness of with my awareness of what happens internally when we are under a great deal of stress, and how we can become the ones to create safety internally rather than wait for Donald Trump to do it or Joe Biden to do it or your boss to do it, which is really where most of us go right away. So I just wanted to bring a little common sense, bring a little sense, and help people make sense of what was happening internally, so that once you make sense of what's happening inside, as within, so is so without. So, in a world, here's the premise behind this, in a world where we are constantly looking outside of ourselves for some sort of a safety and some sort of assurances as we navigate uncertain times. Um, this community, these teachings are really about not looking outside, looking inward first. And that's probably one of the most difficult things to do for most of us because we were raised in an environment where we didn't feel safe. And so we had to abandon ourselves in service of safety, look after mom and dad if there was alcoholism, depression, mental illness. You didn't feel safe, so you, as a child, had to leave your body and tend to the emotions of mom and dad. And that's trauma to a child. It's trauma with a small t. Now, most people don't realize that that is traumatic. It's traumatic to a 3-year-old, 5-year. It's traumatic to a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old nervous system, even an 11-year-old nervous systems. So many of our clients, when we regress them back to the origins of where all of this sense of alarm and anxiety that dwells in our bodies, where does it come from? And guess where? Our childhood woundings are these experiences as a child where we had to abandon our sense of safety internally because we didn't feel safe internally. We then went to create it externally by taking care of mom and dad. Maybe if I looked after mom and dad, maybe if I did the right thing, and I cleaned up properly and I kept my nose clean, I just did all the right things, then I wouldn't have, suffer the consequences, and I can create safety. And so um, when I started doing these transmissions, because here I am understanding about childhood trauma, understanding that where you have grown up, how you grew up, the quality of the relationship between your parents, whether or not you even had an invitation to exist, or you were conceived out of kind of like an accident, a mistake, or whatever. All of that makes a difference to our nervous systems. And so when we are in the conversation of healing, which is really what this entire group and all of our trainings and programs are all about, is the conversation of healing. And if we're in that conversation of healing, we need to go back to the origins. And we need to go back and examine our history, uh, internally, internal history, because the foundation of your neurology and the hard wiring is formulated in the attachment to your primary caregivers, whether they had consistency, whether you felt safe, whether you felt seen or heard. And from examining and working with hundreds of people over the last few years, um, every single time there has been a disconnect between that sense of safety as a child, this need to perform, this need to please, this need to pay attention to and be hyper vigilant to what other people think, and the fear of this person leaving or not, all has to do with our hard wiring from childhood. So you're going to hear me, if you're brand new to this community, you're going to hear me consistently going back to the origins, because if we don't examine the contextual origin of how we end up exactly where we are, then we are forever looking outside of us and playing victims to life, hoping that this person then is going to finally, give me what was missing in childhood. Or maybe this amount of money is going to do it for me, right? And so we always end up falling short when we look outside of ourselves. And so at some point, uh, it behooves us. There's once in a while I like to use that word. It behooves us. Look that word up if you're confused about it. It behooves us to look and examine and take responsibility for our own history, not blame. Disclaimer, everybody a lot of people who are still deeply stuck in a wounded place, and I get if you are, you're still knee deep in it, trying to climb your way out, living in a spiral of shame, living in a spiral of guilt, will listen to what I'm saying and then get triggered and say, "Oh, Nima, you asshole, you're blaming the victim. You're being a victim blamer." And I get how that would seem that way, and it's the exact opposite of what I'm doing, because I don't think you have any blame at all. There is nothing. It is none of it is your fault. Even though you might have you might still be beating yourself up for some of the shameful behaviors that you might be looking back on, just not wanting to look at. And we have moms that scream incessantly to their children, and they message me and they say, "I've become a monster. I promised myself that I wouldn't be like my mother, and I've become like my mother. My kids think that I'm just this." They show me pictures in a coloring book, and they say an angry monster, and they say, "Mom, that's you." And it's just heartbreaking, because that's not the kind of parent that you ever dreamed of yourself being. But the reason why I'm saying this to you is because I want you to really get that none of this is your fault, none of which I'm trying to shame you for or blame you for. The reason why people don't really like talking about these things, and people in my situation don't enjoy particularly talking about this, is because it's a very triggering subject. And when I speak, a lot of times people, you'll notice you're going to get really triggered by what I'm saying. And if you're like a lot of people, you'll send me DMs cussing me out, saying, "How dare you? Are you saying it's all my fault?" And da 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 da. We're dealing with we're dealing with shame, we're dealing with guilt. And so as I'm sharing it with you, even though I don't know you, I'm just talking into this little camera right here. So it's not personal to you. You're going to make it about you. You're going to make what I'm saying about all about you and how I'm possibly attacking you. And so I get those DMs and now I completely understand. So I'm just kind of giving you a disclaimer as I answer these questions from really like, you know, wisdom seeking individuals. The reason why you're in this community is not to just get a support group for people just validating your story. I hope that's not what you're here for. If that's what you're here for, you're in the wrong group. You might as well go to a narcissists recovery support group. There will be tons of you in this, men and women, saying, "Oh, she did this to me and she did that. Oh, girl, you got that. He wasn't worth it for me. I did." And so there's a ton of that, and misery loves company, and have at it. Go to town. I'm sure many of you are part of some support groups, but this is the exact opposite of a support group. Not only are you going to get support, but you're also going to be challenged, and that's the only way that we ever grow is if we embrace challenge. Now, I know that you might have been through some challenges before, but I'm going to invite you to really open your mind to trying on a different lens. A lens that I'm offering you is from 20 years of experience in the mind-body field. I'm a chiropractor. I just retired from chiropractic because I discovered that by healing your attachment wounds and learning how to become trigger proof and how to become a master of your own nervous system and take a trigger, and instead of becoming reactive, expand that space between stimulus and response, heal what it's really about, and then come back a more grounded, a more self-loving, a more courageous, functional adult version of yourself. You can end up in each moment responsive rather than reactive if you learn the tools. I discovered that by mastering that, you could heal so many illnesses, you could transform so many relationships, you could start to feel safer in your body, your anxiety levels start to go down, your digestive system improves, you sleep better at night, you feel more comfortable in your skin. And this is what all of our clients are saying, but it's not an overnight quick fix. People are like, how do I do this? Tell me, how do I do this? So I just did a post yesterday and I said, what questions do you have? And so we got some amazing questions. So I promise you that the answer to these questions and the background that I give is going to be relevant to you in some form, even though you might not have even asked the question, number one. And number two, even if you've heard me before, today is a new different version of you listening to the same message. Hopefully it will land deeper, and here's my ultimate goal. My goal is to wake you up, because if you're like most people, you're scrolling through social media, you are half asleep, maybe 95% asleep. And so sometimes I just got to kind of like wake your asses up, wake our asses up to start living consciously, to take on relationships, to take on your work, to take on your relationship with your body as a spiritual practice. Why? Well, the alternative is unbearable. To live unconsciously at the mercy of these unconscious complexes, to expect to have this happy, fulfilled life without really examining how we unconsciously sabotage it and blame other people for it, is a very important skill to learn. Because if we don't learn it, we will forever be living in the fate of others, hoping, wishing, praying with hope that someone's going to come and fucking rescue us. And I'm here to wake you up to the reality that that rescuer is you. Nobody's here to save you. Stop looking for saviors in the form of like a weekend workshop, in the form of a coach or a mentor or whatever, and learn how to find a guide, because we all need guides. I sure as hell didn't do this alone. A guide and a community to teach you how to walk back home, to teach you how to become a container for yourself, for your family, to teach you what you were never taught as a child. Let me know if any of this is resonating with you as I'm sharing this. Let me know what resonates. But here I'm going to go over some of the questions and answer them one by one, and I'll say the names too because you guys were brave enough. Jane Lulu says, what are the steps to resolving attachment trauma? Once this is addressed, can I still get triggered? Great question. What are the steps? So what happens is that many people try to rationalize healing. So give me step 1, step 2, then step 3, step 4. For those people, I did a training called Becoming Trigger Proof because they're like, what are the steps? So I kind of outline it in a 90-minute training where I describe nervous system regulation, mastering the art of the nervous system. Number 2, clearing your past resentments and all of the baggage that you're carrying. So we have in the nervous system regulation part, we, create habits and routines, a series of habits and routines, so that we can then kind of get in front of the 8 ball of our nervous system and co-create our day rather than becoming a reactive kind of victim to the day where the day kind of drags you around. By taking ownership and creating a series of habits and routines and rituals around your day, you now get in front of the 8 ball. There's breath work to regulate your nervous system. Getting chiropractic care is essential. Exercise is essential. And these meditations called neurosensory attunements are ways to increase the capacity of your nervous system and learn how to drop into your body when you're up in your head in a state of anxiety because you have a sense of alarm in your body. So step 1 is mastering the art of nervous system regulation. Our intimacy upgrade programs basically walk you through, and we practice these together. Number 2 is clearing past resentments. This is the steps we take our clients through. So what we do is at the beginning of working with our clients, when we're helping them through, we get them to write a list of their resentments and regrets. So if you're like most people over the age of 40, you've maybe accumulated a list of resentments and regrets. What we do one by one, and that's why I created the overview method, and we actually have that overview experience this weekend where I teach you how to do it. I leave that open to the public. There's many who've already registered. I'm overwhelmed with the amount of interest of people. Like, I started this group last year, and people are just coming out of nowhere saying, oh my gosh, I heard from so-and-so. I did the overview experience. Can you please sign me up? My friend is raving about it. It's just, okay, here's the link. And what I do in the overview experience is that second step, part of healing the attachment wounds, is resolving your resentments. So in the overview experience, what I have you do is write down, because I teach you how to do it. We all do it together. It's a training. So you're not going to learn the steps by yourself. You got to actually have some guidance because this is hard work. So what we do is we get you to write out your biggest resentment that you're going through, and you write a massive, like, angry letter, shitty first draft letter, as Brene Brown says, to this person or this thing or whatever obstacle that you're resentful for. And then I take you through the steps of dismantling the resentment or the regret that you're going through. And within a 5-hour period, many of our clients feel that they did like 10 to 20 years of therapy in a matter of 5 hours. It's surreal. So the second piece of healing your attachment trauma is to dissolve your resentments and your regrets. Not just here, just say, oh, I forgive you. I forgave. I can listen to your story and then you say, I forgave my father. And I'm like, no, you fucking didn't. You can tell when somebody has transcended it. And what I teach you is how to transcend forgiveness and really get to a place that the highest form of forgiveness is the authentic recognition that everything served you and that there is nothing to forgive. Let me say that again. The highest form of forgiveness is the authentic recognition that everything served you and that there is nothing to forgive. So in our overview experience, I'm going to be walking you through those steps. It takes time. It's not like I can, she said, how do you heal the attachment traumas? I'm like, for fuck's sakes, it takes about 6 months to really master how. But the key component of this is this. You will learn how to do it. It's not something that you need a therapist to do for you. It's something that you can learn, and it's something that's necessary for us to learn if we want to be healthy in our 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. The amount of attachment traumas that's unresolved in your body make the biggest impact in your health and your energy levels in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. My clients ask me, how do you do it? Like, how is it that you do it? You seem so energized. I'm like, well, I'm doing the work. I'm consistently healing my attachment wounds as we go because it's something that I do within myself. It's a practice. It's got physical stuff. It's got meditation, self-healing work like the holistic psychologist describes. That's a big part of it, right? Community is another one. So the third part, so we have nervous system regulation, healing past resentments. Number 3 is you got to learn how to dance with your dark passenger. This is the toughest part. We have a wounded inner child in our shadows. It's part of us that we have been bottling up and pushing away. And so our ego is this sense of identity and personality that we create so that we can protect that wounded child. So if I felt, for example, if I felt like totally insignificant and ignored as a child, then what I'll do is I will create a personality and a persona. I will fragment into this persona who's this amazing showman who loves attention, right? Now, that will then expand my ego, and I will not expand my ego, but the ego is this sense of personality and identity that I will create called the Dr. Nima show. My friends before, when I would come over and visit, they'd be like, uh-oh, the Dr. Nima show is here. And what they were saying at the time I wasn't aware of was, here comes his big fucking ego. But my ego was there to protect my wounded child of insignificance. Now, understanding this relationship is very difficult, and it takes a great deal of courage to face and feel that insignificance. But unless I do, then my ego will run the show, which is, by the way, what I'm answering the next question about where narcissists come from. This is kind of leading into that. So this dance between my ego, which is there trying to, this personality and this identity that I create to protect all my wounded inner child, this here, without a understanding of these and an ability to observe and call out my ego that's trying to protect my inner child, so this is my higher self, then what happens is I can't see that relationship. I then become my ego, which is what narcissism is. You then identify with this personality you've created, which is hiding a wounded child, but because I can't see it, I haven't been able to dance with this dark passenger, then I'm possessed by it. If you can't see it, then you're possessed by it. And so this is very difficult. So part of healing my attachment wounds, your journey as well, this is all of our journey. We're all in the same boat, is for us to be very highly skilled at calling out our ego. But here's the biggest obstacle. You're not going to want to do it. In fact, you're likely going to go to counselors or therapists for 20 fucking years repeating the same goddamn story, but because the counselor or psychiatrist or psychologist, A, isn't trained, or B, doesn't really want to confront it for you and get in trouble because of the professional standards and practices, then they will just keep supporting your story. And then they'll nod and say, oh, poor you. And they'll just keep validating you, which is exactly how your ego thrives. Your ego will thrive on getting external validation, thinking that, oh my gosh, I'm getting my needs met. But the thing is that it's just creating a bigger gaping hole. So this is my main criticism of going to counselors or therapists, is that oftentimes, if they're not training you to, first of all, there's no guarantee that they've done their own inner work. This is what I'm calling, what this is, dancing with your dark passenger, is shadow work. Just because I have a counselor's diploma or a psychologist degree does not mean that I've faced my own fucking shadows. So if I haven't faced my own shadows, how am I going to help you face yours? I can't. So my favorite, I know a lot of counselors, psychologists, uh, quite a few who I'm friends with who've abandoned their licenses and then got into coaching because they were tired of just wanting people to validate themselves in the story. You cannot heal your attachment wounds just going to a counselor, repeating your story, and having it validated week after week. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work that way. That's why people come to our programs and they go, "Oh my God, I've been doing counseling for 20 fucking years. And in the first hour, I have learned more now in 1 hour than all my years of therapy," is because right away in the work we do, we get you to call out the truth, and the truth will set you free, but you'll resist the truth because the truth is very triggering. So the last fucking thing people want to do is to call out the truth, which is the hallmark of a narcissist. The narcissist does not want to see the truth. The narcissist is become the shadow so they can't see that it's driving the bus. So dancing with your dark passenger is a critical component of healing your attachment wounds. This is what we part of literally, and it's hard work. It's like physical training. On our group calls, we do it week after week, and here's the cool part about it. Our clients absolutely fucking love it because it's different, and our clients absolutely fucking hate it at the same time because it's extremely painful. It's like doing CrossFit for your soul. If you've ever done CrossFit, you have a group of people about to do the workout of the day, and then the bell rings, and then you go, and then sometimes people end up puking because it's so difficult, but they keep going back for more because of the incredible results that you get. The results being feeling a sense of resilience, not being so easily triggered. When you are triggered, you're able to regulate it. Why? Because your shadows are what get triggered. So without really dancing with your shadows and learning how to do that, you're not going to heal your attachment wounds. This is why our focus in our intimacy accelerator, intimacy upgrade, and all of our trainings is a deep, deep, deep dive into that. That's why we interview people before we work with them. We do applications because, quite frankly, this is not for everyone. Sometimes we've turned people, 80% of the time, we turn people away. Say, "You're looking for support group, go do more counseling when you've kind of reached a little, what do you call it, plateau with your counseling work. This is when you're ready. You know, you might not be ready just coming in off the street after a devastating heartbreak, maybe doing a year of counseling or whatever. This is for you when you're ready to overcome your story." It's kind of like weight loss, you know. Why don't my husband, I should send him to your thing. I'd be like, "No, I don't want to work with your husband." This is like weight loss. The only way I'd work with your husband is if your husband was like, "I've been following you. I'm tired of my bullshit. I'm ready to take ownership." And until then the person isn't ready for this level of work because I'm not his fucking hero. I'm not your hero. I'm my own hero. I'm working on healing my own wounds. I just love guiding people to become their own hero. That's how you heal attachment wounds, not by fixating on a coach or a therapist to do the work for you. No, no, this is you doing the work for you. I'm in it with you. I'm your guide to connecting to yourself. Does that make sense? And everything that I'm telling you is the medicine that I required for myself. So nothing that I would make you do is something that I wouldn't do myself. It's kind of like the CrossFit trainer that you have. You want to make sure that the guy who's doing, I use CrossFit a lot because it's such a great analogy, any type of group fitness training, because that's what we're doing. We're doing emotional fitness together. You want to make sure that the person that is teaching you or is training you, they themselves are actually living what they're teaching, right? So you can always tell when somebody's really genuine and sincere. Their body language says it. They're just finding a guide who's living what they're teaching is really key. So nervous system regulation, clearing your past resentments, learning to dance with your dark passenger, empathic communication, learning how to empathically communicate because your inner critic has been pretty much in the driver's seat most of your life, and to unwind that and turn that language around to be more empathetic and compassionate towards oneself is very difficult. and it's going to take practice, and you're going to fail at it again and again and again until you start to notice our clients within about 3 months are like, wow, I'm so much kinder to myself. I don't beat myself up so much. I feel less anxiety. It's pretty cool. So uh, then the last part is to heal your attachment wounds is commitment. It takes a commitment. If you're like, people will message one of my pet peeves. People message me, if I do your workshop on Saturday, what if it doesn't work? I'm like, define work. It's like going to a CrossFit Games, CrossFit workout and go, what if I do this training and it doesn't work? It doesn't work that way. It works to identify the exact problem that you're dealing with now and the origin and teach you a tool. See, what I'd like for you to get is that you're learning, instead of finding a hero to save you, look to learn a process to help you come up with solutions to your own problems. So what I love doing, the thing that's different about what we do here is that you're not learning, Nima's not going to rescue you. Nima wants to teach you a process and a methodology to internalize and to start living so that you yourself can regulate your own nervous system, can respond rather than react, can heal relationships, can take conflict and turn it into deeper intimacy. You're the one to learn to do the work, but you got to learn the process and the tools. That's it. So it's a strategy of doing that. And commitment and community. We require community. You've heard the term, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, actually, what I've discovered is that it also takes a village to raise an inner child. And that when you hear other people's experiences and you can see it reflected back to you, that has a magical profound effect to help transform because of the quality of the container itself. So what I do is this community is I hold a container where is a conversation dedicated to healing rather than victimhood. Very different than the traditional narrative, but that's what people are, and find this, and you must invest in it. There's the last part. Jane, Lulu, you got to invest in a solution. Everybody thinks that they're going to, just show up on a Facebook Live and that's going to help, or listen to a podcast or read a book and that's going to do it. No, you got to invest. You got to actually feel worthy of investing the time, the energy, the resources in doing that. The biggest obstacle you'll have is that you've probably been abandoning yourself all your life, that to invest time and energy into just towards yourself will feel incredibly selfish. You won't feel worthy and deserving of it. And so you'll keep that narrative going, and because that's a product of your attachment wound. So you got to bypass all of that. And so that's what we have in the intimacy upgrade. So those of you who are coming in on Saturday to learn and practice how to heal those attachment wounds, that's what you're going to be learning all in 5 hours. So it's not therapy. You're not going to be sitting there telling your story. You'll share it at the beginning. There's a little survey if you want to share, but essentially you're going to see how I take you through an experience where it's like seeing your whole life from a 30,000 foot view, like from this perspective right there. There it is. Oh, there it is right there. That's why I call it the overview experience, because on Saturday you're going to be stepping out here and looking at your life from this perspective, from the overview perspective. And from a conscious perspective, you now have the tools to make little incremental progress changes over time and see a huge difference in your relationships, see a huge difference in the way that you parent your kids, less screaming, less reactive, less taking everything so goddamn personally, being able to set boundaries. All of that happens on the other side of doing those things. So hopefully that was helpful. And this is where we do all of that, essentially. The steps, what are the steps to resolving attachment trauma? That's what it is. Once this is addressed, can I still get triggered? Abso-fucking-lutely you can, and you will. But the thing is that you're learning a process. Most people are like, oh, I'm triggered, I failed. No, you didn't. You're just meeting another part of yourself from your past that you can then rescue and use every trigger to turn into self-love. So You will get triggered, but they won't be as severe, and you'll be able to respond a lot more smoother, and they won't pull you out for days, weeks, months. You actually can respond from a trigger, which happens. I get triggered daily, but it, my emotions don't pull me out of my purpose. That's the key. You're learning a skill. Hopefully that's helpful. Rita asks, working on two things about myself. Could use any insight. Number one, how to overcome fear of abandonment. Number two, how to overcome self-pity. Great questions. Overcoming fear of abandonment. That comes from childhood. So the fear of abandonment, first of all, you got to understand where it comes from. It comes from an experience of losing connection with mom or dad. This could be from any different things. You know what I mean? Like if you were in utero and your mother and your father split up while you were in utero, your mother's stress hormone chemicals download to yours, and you unconsciously download the abandonment wound in your body, and you start off life like that, and you don't know it's there until you get into relationships. And then the guy says, oh, I'm out for a weekend, and you're like, oh my god, I'm going crazy, and boom, you start becoming reactive, hyperventilating, panic attacks. You're like, where is this coming from? And a lot of times, um, people don't know where this fear of abandonment comes from. One of our clients is a lawyer in Australia. She's like, why is this? Like, I have both parents. They were, my mom's a bit of a rageaholic, but they were both there. Where's it coming from? And it turns out when we did breath work, a 3-year-old version of her connected in that breathwork session, and she was sick in the hospital for a period of a couple of weeks. So in those times, that's enough time for the stress chemicals, the stress and survival chemicals of a three-year-old to then now imprint on the message that, I'm alone, right? And so how to overcome fear of abandonment is first to identify the origin of the trigger, whether you're aware of it, whether you're not. That's up to you. The breathwork experience that we do, it uncovers it. If you don't know what it is, you might be listening going, oh, I know exactly what it is. Dad left, they got a divorce, or dad had an affair, found out about it when I was like 8, and I've just been feeling abandoned ever since he abandoned us. Or mom chose her addiction over me, and boom, abandonment wound. Whatever happens, we have this egocentric part of us in our inner child that literally makes everything that happens outside of us about us. And the story that we make up is, I'm not lovable. I'm not worthy enough. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not good enough. I'm broken. Yeah, I'm undeserving. And the problem with that is that it's not a conscious thought that you're having. It's a feeling in your body. And you don't even know it's there. It just shows up in your behavior in relationships. What do you got to do to overcome it? Well, you got to reconnect with those younger parts of you. There might not just be one part. There might be 3 or 4. However many, to learn the process of healing those attachment wounds, which I just outlined before in the process that we take our clients through. I'm not saying you got to do it with us. I'm saying you can't leave out any of those steps. You got to actually master how to integrate that into your way of being. You can take a trigger, and then instead of reacting, you can now have a series of action steps to take to integrate that trigger, because that abandonment wound is going to come up. And then what will happen is you will get into a relationship with somebody, Amrita. You'll get into a relationship, and then, let's say you're dating this person, you start dating, and then a couple months in, he goes away for like the weekend. All of a sudden, boom, your abandonment wounds are going to show up. One of the clients I'm working with right now, she's been making huge progress. She did our intimacy accelerator program. She went from anxiously attached to like securely attached when her partner goes away for a few weeks. And for like 2 weeks, she's like not losing her shit like she normally would, right? Doing amazing, like massive progress. Then in the few days before she returns, all of those abandonment wounds start to come up. and she becomes reactive, and she totally starts going into story, playing the victim, oh my goodness, like back and forth consistently, and behaving like a 9-year old again. And so what she's noticing now is her work is to now reconnect using the tools to that 9-year old and resource that part. So now a trip of a month is more tolerable. See, a trip of a weekend away from her partner would have sent her through the roof. But as she did the work, now a 3 week a 3 week trip was tolerable until the last couple of days. So you see how it's progressive. You see how healing is progressive. It's like anything. It's like any flexibility. Do you know what I mean? I don't want you to look at this journey of healing as like a finish line. No, it's like yoga. You know what I mean? It's like you're increasing flexibility. You're increasing capacity. Whereas this client didn't have the capacity to spend a weekend away from her partner because of her abandonment wounds. After doing like 6 weeks of work intensively, she's now able to move it to 3 weeks. Does it go away like that? No. It is progressive. It is a muscle. It is expanding on your flexibility. But you might be thinking, but that's exhausting. Why do I have to work on that? Well, the alternative is fucking unbearable. She started realizing, like, I can't live this way anymore. I can't just pretend like it's just going to go away. I can't just hope that I'm going to meet someone who's not going to bring that on. Because if she breaks up with this person, it's going to come up again with the next relationship. So it's not that you're taking the blame, it's not her fault, but she's just wise enough to know that, you know what? It's my responsibility. I want to help learn how to self-soothe so that when these abandonment triggers come up, I know exactly how to self-soothe. That's what your work is, Amrita, is overcoming your fear of abandonment is the willingness to feel abandoned, the willingness to lean into those feelings and learn how to self-soothe. There's no other way to do it. There's no magic bullet. You must heal those attachment wounds. And how to overcome self-pity. It's the same thing. The self-pitying part of you is is um, is trying to protect you. There's a part of you that's self-pitying. It's representative of a part of your shadow, part of your wounded child. And this self-pitying part of you is trying to protect you. But every time you are listening to thoughts of self-pity and you're judging them and you're making them wrong, you're gaslighting them, and you're trying to push that self-pitying, resistant part of you into the corner, it's going to become stronger. So you can't get rid of. You must learn how to integrate that part of you, to listen to what that part of you really wants, to listen to that self-pitying part of you. What are their fears? What are their desires? Really getting to know that wounded child. And when you can give that wounded child what they are feeling like they're lacking, that they need to self-pity you in order to get their needs met, if you are the one to meet their needs, guess what happens to your self-pitying? It then starts to turn down. You start to listen to self-pitying, and you're, instead of going, fuck, I'm self-pitying again, God, I'm such a failure, which is more self-pity, you're able to stop and go, oh man, I can totally see how much you're trying to protect me. And you're able to self-soothe that part rather than become a victim to yourself, right? It's just resistance within ourselves. That's really the whole key. Hopefully that was useful for you. Is any of this useful for you that I'm saying right now? Is any of this useful? I'm probably not going to get through all the questions. I'll maybe do another Facebook Live tomorrow, but these are great topics of discussion. What do healthy boundaries look like, and how to let go of guilt when practicing setting boundaries? Ha ha ha. Jasmina, Jazz is a self-sacrificer rescuer in remission. Ha ha. Well, that's never going anywhere. First of all, the rescuer self-sacrificer is the wounded child inside of you, Jasmina or Yasmina, who felt like she had to perform and be good and please in order to be a good girl, in order to get an identity, in order to be special. So naturally these childhood kind of habits become your way of being in relationships. So what ends up happening is you end up identifying your sense of worth in getting somebody else's approval. So then when you show up in a relationship all of a sudden, when you say no to someone and set a boundary, and then that when you set a boundary and you actually say, no, thank you, I don't really want to be touched there, that person might feel rejected and all of a sudden get triggered and then turn around and go, what are you talking about? Not, I wasn't trying to touch you. You're so, and then their reaction towards you would have you end up feeling guilty and going, why did I even, God, why didn't I even set a boundary? Like, I'm so nervous. I just got shat on. I'm getting punished. Anytime you feel like your partner is punishing you, just know that there's a wound going on. If you've ever felt punished in a relationship, I remember that it was just last week. I got into a little argument with Diana, and immediately I just sat there as we were walking. We were both walking, and I was sitting there. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling punished right now. And the second that I was like, whoa, I'm feeling punished, I knew right then, I was like, I'm acting from a wound. This has got nothing to do with Diana. This has got to do with her behavior is reminding me of my mother. And I feel like her pulling away is punishment towards me. And the second that I saw that, I knew that this moment was, I'm in a wound right now. But that's because I've been working on becoming trigger proof. I'm working on taking responsibility. If I didn't do that, I'd be like still stuck in the conflict going, why are you punishing me? Just because I said so and so. And then like literally becoming that 8-year-old or 10-year-old. That's why relationships become toxic. It's because you got two 10-year-olds fighting, right? And so that doesn't help me. It doesn't help her. So I was able to see that. And so what happens is when you set a boundary and then you hear that person hears no and that sets off their attachment wounds, all of a sudden you then start to feel guilt. And because guilt is intolerable to you, excuse me, you will sacrifice yourself so that you don't feel guilt. You think you're sacrificing yourself, but the truth is you're not sacrificing yourself at all. You're protecting yourself from guilt. Let me say that again. Those pleasers, oh, I please, I just do it for other people. I'm a sacrificer. I'm such a martyr. I'm a martyr for all these people, right? You are protecting yourself from the intolerable feelings of fucking guilt. And your inability to sit in those emotions is what causes us, my inability to sit in the emotions of guilt is what causes me to not be able to say no to you. Because this happens all the time. I get DMs constantly from people who have no fucking clue about boundaries. So when I say, sorry, I'm not going to just DM an answer to that. That takes a while. I'm not going to read your 10-page story and give you advice. I'm not going to spend my time from home to do that. I'm not going to spend my time away from my family to do that. You're not a client. You're not really, like, I'm not going to give you advice. Like, my inbox is now flooded. So for me to say no immediately to somebody who doesn't have a good set of boundaries will feel like rejection. And then they come at me, oh, you just want the money. You're just greedy. Da, 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 da. And then inside of me, I'm like, fuck. There I did it. Just like when I was a kid, I said no to my mom, and my mom took it as rejection. I end up feeling guilty. So now I'm trained, I'm conditioned like a fucking puppy to not say no and just say yes and then exhaust myself and then resent the person and then resent my clients and resent you in the community for bombarding me with all these questions that I don't know how to say no to because I'm not strong enough to handle guilt. So then what happens is when I work on healing my and resolving my attachment wounds, you can ask me a question. Then I'll say, I'm sorry, please ask the group. I might do a video for you. I'm really taking care of people who are committed now. The people that I'm going to put my time, attention, and presence to are people who are actually serious about becoming cycle breakers. Not people who just want to be validated like a fucking support group. That's not what this is about. I want to work with those who get that they had some shitty experiences, but they want to take full responsibility, not blame, to heal that. And I'm going to put all of my heart, my soul, my focus on that, them, and my family, because that's where my priorities are right now. So we now have an application process. We have our events that people come to. And when people DM me, I'll say, sorry, please attend. And then what will happen is they'll have their reaction. And my work is to regulate myself through the guilt, because it still hurts my feelings when people start going off on me because I haven't solved I didn't come to their rescue. And I hear it all the time. People will, watch my YouTube videos and message me because you think you know me, right? Like, I'm talking into a camera. I get very intimate with details about my life. You might have followed me for a while. You'll message me and it's as though you have this like relationship with me already, but you're forgetting that I don't really know you, right? You just assume that I do. Um, you might assume that I do, and so when you DM me and then I say no, you'll transfer all of your father wounds onto me, and you'll basically say, oh, he didn't rescue me, just like my dad, just like all the other men in my life. I've had women just fucking tell me this on my DMs, right? To the point where I'm just like, I don't really want to answer them now. Um, and listen to me playing victim, of course, right? But the reason why I'm sharing this with you is that saying no and setting boundaries requires of me an ability to sit in and regulate myself through the guilt, because it doesn't feel good to say no to someone who's genuinely asking for help, is in a desperate situation, and has no ability, no means, no ability to kind of show up at any of the events because they're on food stamps, or sometimes have 6 children with 3 different men and on food stamps, and they're like, save me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's no way I can fix this. You got to save you. So by saying no to these people, I got to sit in some guilt. And that's an art form. And it's just a practice, Jasmina, that over time, once you become firmly established in the definition of who you are, you're able to set boundaries. You're able to ask for what you want. And instead of going around trying to set boundaries with people, which is very defensive, I feel a lot safer where I just ask for what I want. It's like if I don't feel safe with you, I have to set boundaries. But if I feel safe within myself, I can just ask for what I want from you. Hey, I'm making a request. If it's a no, that's okay. I'm willing to leave if this is a no. Right? But I'm willing. I love myself enough to ask for what I want. So when I don't actually do classes with my clients on teaching healthy boundaries, it's a kind of I can teach you what to say, but I'd rather teach you how to get congruent with you so that you speak your truth. You don't need to listen to Nima's like script on how to, please don't call me after a certain amount. Like, you don't have to hear my script on setting a boundary. If you connect with you and that inner voice, you'll be able to speak the truth of who you are, and that in and itself becomes a definition of who you are, which is what a boundary is. So healthy boundaries education is for people who don't know how to connect to themselves. When you connect to yourself, you won't have to learn about how to set a healthy boundary because you're so connected to yourself. You just speak your truth. And people are like, okay. Or, no, that doesn't work for me. And you're like, okay, that sounds good. Hopefully that was helpful. Tanya, I couldn't wait to get to this question. She said, narcissistic soon-to-be ex won't let go or let me move on. He wants us to keep living in the same house until the kids grow up. Meanwhile, he periodically goes on verbal rampages that are traumatizing everyone. How do I get him to let go? Love these. And Tanya also was talking about narcissists. She says, I just heard of the word. I never realized what this word was. And My friend and me was like, why is everyone a narcissist except me? They're everywhere. Yeah. I didn't know it even existed until I was researching why my marriage was a failure after 3 months. Yeah, interesting. My marriage was a failure after 3 months? Because my husband's a narcissist. Exactly. It's really good way of avoiding responsibility. I'm not saying it's your fault, but when you can just label them, then all of your friends will be like, "Oh, poor you. I was with a narcissist too." Mm. There are a million narcissist support groups out there for women, especially. Well, there's a lot of guys too. I've heard just as many like crazy ass narcissistic women stories who just use and manipulate and all that. And whether it's the guy or the girl, male or the female, I really want you to understand narcissism a little bit. I'm going to give you a little background. When you grow up and you don't have a family that knows how to emotionally attune to you, and you go through trauma, if you've ever listened to, I'm going to use the classic example of R. Kelly. If you've ever watched his documentary, this is a classic example of narcissism. Why is there so many narcissists? Narcissist is the buzzword. Everybody gets triggered over that. And so the common denominator here is trauma. Trauma causes a separation from self. And if I grow up with parents who they themselves are dissociated and disconnected from themselves, will then use their parenting and their children as an extension of themselves. My son needs to be a doctor. My son needs to be the most successful. My daughter needs to be the prettiest, or whatever. What happens is the parent, because of their inability to regulate their shadow or integrate their shadow, and they are at the effect of their unworthiness, not good enoughness, they will then they will then raise children to not feel seen. It's like you're being put in a box. You got to behave in this way, and unless you are exactly here, then you're not lovable under these qualities and conditions, right? So the child then gets raised to feel that they themselves, who they are, is not worthy of love, is not good enough, is undeserving. They don't feel seen, they feel emotionally stunted, and what we do is we become emotionally stunted at that age of that fracture from ourselves. This fracture from ourselves that causes us to feel insignificant and incredibly needy of validation. Now, does this sound familiar to you? Is this story any familiarity to your life? Now, here's what'll happen. Growing up with that deep core wound of not feeling acknowledged, not feeling seen, your persona will split. You will create a personality, a persona, which is a false sense of self. The word persona means mask. So you put on this mask to compensate as a coping mechanism for this insignificance. It will go one of two ways. Way number one is the narcissist, that I will become obsessed with external validation from the many. One is not enough. I need everybody to confirm to me everything that I'm missing inside. I need to be the best. I need to be number one. I need to be. In other words, you're run by your shadow, the ego, this person that's protecting this insignificant wounded child that feels so not good enough, that's so unworthy, so paralyzingly low self-esteem, that we cope by creating this megalomania that everybody needs to see me. I'm the best in the world. The Donald Trumps, the um, the R. Kellys of the world. I'm just using big kind of like examples that you'll be able to identify. And please understand, those people can be, I think, classified with an NPD, like the diagnosis, the medical diagnosis. But I want to get away from the diagnostics. I don't want to talk about it in terms of the DSM-IV because I just see them all as an adaptation to trauma. I don't think it's an illness or a disorder. Like, I'm not saying R. Kelly can be healed. Only R. Kelly would have to want to be healed and want to actually own his shit, right? He'd want to actually go, you know what? I want to heal this, but I don't know. He's been denying all of the allegations all his life. So people ask, can narcissism be healed? Well, for some people, yeah, it depends on the person. It's not a one, it's not like, it's not an absolute, right? It depends on the person, the level of wounding. So R. Kelly had sexual trauma when he was 12, when he was 13. Throughout his childhood, he was sexually abused, right? And so he was shy. He probably felt unworthy. And so, boom, out creates this larger than life, amazing singer, amazing talent, just amazing artist, uh, as a response to that little insignificant boy, right? So that's way number one, right? Where he need one wife, one woman, whatever is not enough. So that's the extreme of the spectrum. Megalomania. It's gotta be all about me. I'm the most important. He would date these women and he'd be like, you can't even look at another person. So then what happens is, because of this paralyzing fear of insignificance and being found out to be insignificant, what we do is we try to control. What they'll do is they'll try to control their environment. They will say, you can't talk to this person. This is the coercive, controlling, manipulative, kind of extreme, overt, malignant narcissist, right? They don't let you go out. You can't talk to anyone. You can't, I'm going to monitor what you eat. You can only eat this, 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 and this. There's violence, there's spanking, there's whatever. Like, all of that is there in that extreme. Now, there's a spectrum from R. Kelly to just kind of mildly narcissistic, where you're constant victim to the world, where everything is all about you. Everybody's out to get you. Everybody's just something against you, and it's just all about you, right? And you're constantly playing the victim. You have zero ability to empathize with another, because of the fact that you don't have an ability to empathize with yourself. We've worked with people who were like, I think I'm a narcissist, and we found out they were, and they're actually healing from it, right? They weren't at the level of R. Kelly, but, you know, down the spectrum, they recognized it, and by healing with those younger, insignificant parts, you can move yourself back in and find empathy for others, be able to take feedback and criticism, because you've healed that insignificant part of you you've been hiding from the world. You now expose your shadows. Shadow work is how you heal that. So you're gonna, with that insignificance, you're either gonna go from one end of the extreme, or you're gonna go to the other end of the extreme, which is to seek the validation of the one, whether it's mom, whether it's dad, and become obsessively controlling of situations by taking care of, by becoming empaths. So I'm an extreme empath. It's what people, when they're saying that, they're like, I just want you to know I'm the opposite of a narcissist. But the thing is, what you're not seeing from that is that the narcissist and empath are two sides of the same coin. The narcissist wants the approval of the many. The codependent, the insignificant, needy, gets acted out in seeking the approval of the one. And you find one person, whether it's mom, whether it's dad, whether it's this person, this relationship you become obsessed with, and then you just become obsessed with controlling. And you'll choose people who are megalomaniac, but then have this fatal flaw like alcoholism, depression, some sort of, with the narcissist comes like some sort of an addiction that the insignificant codependent can take care of. Here's a wounded bird. They don't have all their shit together, but I'm going to take care of them and become an empath and totally just obsess over having this one person's approval. Now take a look at this. You have the same thing, but exposed differently. The narcissist wants the approval of the many. The codependent wants the approval of the one. Both become completely one-dimensional about the object of their desire. And they become blinded to everything else. In other words, they don't see how they're not able to be with anyone else except the object of their obsession, whether it's the approval of the many or the approval of the one. And many of these women who, oh, I was with a abusive narcissist, he's a narcissist, 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 who've been obsessing about this narcissist that they've been completely lamenting that they don't have their approval. What do they look? What happens is what they don't notice is that there are children around them that are looking at them as the narcissist, who has no ability to empathize with the children. You become an empath and become hyper vigilant to getting the approval of this one megalomaniac narcissist, pointing the finger that, oh, narcissist, 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 not realizing there are three fingers pointing right back at you, and there are other people in your life that are looking and going, yeah, we've totally lost Tanya. Tanya, all she does is talk about this victim story to this horrible villain in her life, and there's nothing else in her life except that fucking story. And now, unknowingly, without any conscious awareness, you've now become the covert narcissist. And I've said this before, and it's a very new concept. It's very triggering to many people, but this is a wake-up call. You're not here for just kind of supporting and validating your story. You can find that elsewhere. You're here for healing. And the moment that you can own that person that you're looking at, who you're judging and blaming as being a narcissist, who's just basically, I'm not justifying their behavior, I'm saying probably they are, but they're not the ones looking for help, or they're not the ones complaining. You're the one complaining. Your work is to look and see, where am I a covert narcissist myself? Where is that a reflection of my shadow? Because the truth is, it is. And like, I've been in this line of work so many times, and I've heard this. I'm an empath. My so-and-so's a narcissist. I'm an empath. I'm special. I'm a victim. I'm a this, I'm a this, I'm a victim. I don't play the victim, but I'm a victim to this narcissist. Like, yes, consider the possibility that you're in a drama triangle where you're seeing them as the perpetrator, you the victim, looking for a hero outside of you, and the only way out of this mess is to get the fuck out of this triangle and see that, yes, you're the victim, but you're also the perpetrator. And knowing that you're the perpetrator to yourself when you abandoned yourself, you're the perpetrator to yourself when you've betrayed yourself, you're the perpetrator to yourself when you've ignored your intuition. So if you take ownership of that and see where you yourself are mirroring and reflecting narcissism, who would see you as being a wounded victim, that all you do is tell everybody your story and you exaggerate how significant you are, and it's painful. This is shadow work. People start wanting to vomit. In fact, what I'm probably saying to you might highly be triggering. You might say, fuck you, Nima, to which I say, yeah, I get it. It's part of this work. It was very painful for me when I realized that I was exactly the thing that I was projecting in my ex. That everything that I saw outside of myself was actually within me. And it wasn't until I stopped looking outside, which will take you months of rehab to stop looking outside of yourself and start looking in, because you're so used to becoming hypervigilant outside. When we tell our clients, stop paying attention outside, it takes weeks for them to hear it. I tell them, stop looking outside. Again, boom, back outside. Stop looking out. Let's deal with the war that's happening internally. That's the only way that you can change your situation. So essentially, your work here is to own why you are the perfect match for a narcissist. Why? And the answer always comes back to that insignificant little child inside of us that is looking for validation externally. If I feel completely insignificant about myself, I feel like I am worth nothing because of my unresolved childhood wounding, and I meet you, and I have a specific skill, or I have some resources, and I meet you, and you don't have resources, you are, wounded in some way and needing help, the way that you'll be able to manipulate me is to start telling me how amazing I am and give me validation. And if I'm insecure, if I'm completely insecure within myself, I'm going to be so prone to just soaking the shit out of all of that validation you're giving me. Oh, oh my goodness. They think I'm wonderful. Do you think what they did you hear what they said? They said I'm such a great coach. I'm such a great speaker. And then I'll just be like, finally the validation that I'm seeking. Yes, I'll do whatever you say. Then I easily become manipulatable by you. If you're in a survival state, you're stuck in survival stress, you're going to look for resources and air outside of you. That's what's going to happen. It's what we do when we are in fight or flight, freeze, survival stress. We are looking for air. We're looking for a savior. So if you enter a relationship being someone's savior, trying to fix and rescue, you will then end up becoming resentful and becoming their perpetrator, to which they play victim to, and then they will attack you. And then you will feel victimized, attacking them. Then they feel like a victim, and then they attack you back. And then you're like, narcissist, narcissist. When I talk to them, they're like, she's a narcissist. And the truth is, we're all at least covert narcissists. How do I know you're not a narcissist? When you can own that you are a narcissist. Let me say that again. How can I tell that you're not a narcissist? Well, when I go out and you tell me exactly all of the parts of you that behave narcissistically. You want to know why? Because a true narcissist denies that they have any parts of narcissism within them. So if I'm telling you, yeah, you covert narcissist, and you're like, no, I'm not, I'm an empath. Look closely, sweetheart. However, if you tell me, Nima, you're a narcissist, and I'm like, yeah, I can totally see that. I'm a little bit embarrassed about it, but there's been a lot of times where I've shown up all about me, needy of attention because I felt completely insecure, wanting to play the victim. And just by me telling you that and owning that in that moment and being for real, like not just bullshitting, in that moment, I'm not a narcissist, because a true narcissist is so blinded by their ego they can't even see it, which is what I'm talking about in the shadow work. So the healing of this, the real question you want to ask is, what do I got to do to heal this? Well, you got to put down the magnifying glass and pick up a fucking mirror instead and start looking inward and healing those insignificant parts of you from your attachment wounds, finding a guide, a mentor who's not afraid to hold a mirror and go, sweetheart, let's look again. Your healing is my priority, not your validation of me. If you want to say fuck you, which I hear quite a bit with my clients, that's fine. I can handle it. I know what I'm here to do. I'm here to help you heal so that you can break the cycles, so that you don't turn into one of those narcissistic parents that you were parented by, because they had no availability of this technology to hear this message, to have these tools to heal those attachment wounds. In fact, I want you to imagine your life. I want you to imagine your life, how different it would be if you actually, if they did. If they were able to spot their ego and come up to you one day and go, you know what? I noticed that a lot of times when you have big emotions, I don't validate them. I make your emotions about me, and then I try to fix you, and you end up feeling not worthy. Can you tell me what that was like for you? Can you imagine your mom or dad coming and telling you that? No. But that's what our parents do to their children in our programs, because they have decided to take on being the cycle breaker. They have decided to know that, look, none of this behavior that you're showing up unconsciously in relationships is anything your fault. None of it's your fault. However, it's your responsibility and capability of learning the tools of bringing those insignificant parts of my younger self home, the wounded inner child, the parts of us that we don't know are there but are actually running our lives unconsciously. How do I know? Well, there's this deep sense of anxiety and background alarm that's running my life constantly. And because that's so painful, I'll be in my head and I'll be anxious. But if I just pause and learn how to go into my body and deal with the resistance, that resistant little inner child itself, through meditation practices, through self-healing work, through a healing conversation, through excuse me, through leaning in to really uncomfortable conversations, to waking up instead of just kind of like brushing it aside. Maybe someone else will do it. Why doesn't he do the work? All of that shit, which is our Peter Pan syndrome that don't want to grow up. And just put the hand up and say, I want to be a cycle breaker. And I'm really grateful for you in this community who have stood up and are doing that. The way that I know that you are is actually, you're not just saying it, but you're actually showing up at our breathwork event. You're showing up at the overview experience. And then it's shitty what you're going through, but you're not wanting to take the blame for it. You're actually wanting to take responsibility for showing up as a functional adult so you can break that cycle that's going to keep perpetuating down one generation after another. It's work that you can't avoid. It's going to come up to you. It's going to bump up against you with unhealthy habits, sabotage, anxiety, codependency in relationships, wanting to please and fix and rescue. All these patterns that you're going, you can't liberate yourself from them. You can't keep running away. You got to wake up and turn around and face those parts. And that's the only way to do it. So I think, yes. And Juliana says, my son is my biggest trigger. I've been abused by men my entire adult life. My son is nearly 10 and is so mean. And I fear my fears of him becoming just like all the men I've ever been with. Just like all the men I've ever been with. Okay? For possibly acting just like a traumatized young boy. Yes, you are. You are unconsciously projecting all of your wounding onto your son. I'm not saying it's your fault, but this is what will happen when you don't address it at its root cause. And then he will then feel unseen and unheard, and that is exactly where narcissism comes from. You're basically, this is how narcissism just kind of, and really unresolved attachment wounds just pass from one generation to another generation. Juliana, you're literally mapping it out for me right there exactly. My son's dad and I split when he was 1. My husband has been in his life since he was 2.5, has treated him and me like garbage for 6 years, and I'm now in the toxic process of divorcing him. Yeah, my son's bio dad died a year ago yesterday. My son has ADD and anxiety. Lord, I try, but his mouth and attitude frighten me. Yeah, so he has ADD and anxiety because he has unresolved trauma. I don't want you to think he has a disorder. If a child has unresolved trauma because of divorce and a death of a parent, there's no way that he feels safe in his body. So he'll be fidgety and anxiety. So he doesn't have a condition. He's actually healthy. He's actually responding completely normally to an abnormal situation. So the more that you project that he's ill and sick, the more that unworthiness will be downloaded to him, that I'm broken, right? It just perpetuates, right? And the only way, how do I raise this child and stop letting his behaviors trigger my fears and past experiences? It's by doing the thing that you're going to be most resistant to. Juliana, you gotta heal those attachment wounds from every one of your perpetrators. There's no other way to do it. When you do, you're less reactive to your son, more responsive. Your calmness then kind of resonates to him. Just think about your life growing up. When mom's nervous system was, the way that mom's nervous system amped up and anxious, the whole house is the same. So the greatest gift you can give your son is a self-loving mother, a mother who loves herself. But it's not something that you've ever learned, so you need guidance in that. And so healing those attachment wounds is not only for you, it's for the sake of your son who's been through enough trauma. And then what our clients are noticing is that their parenting goes through the roof. Simply by shifting your attachment wounds to those younger parts of yourself, healing from the victimhood of all of those perpetrators, and healing the insignificant parts of yourself that felt unworthy, that kept running into those, not your fault, found yourself in the same Same relationship, different haircut, same pattern. It's really about taking not blame but responsibility for the parts of you that were attracted to men like that because it was familiar from childhood. So the way that you help your son in all of those accounts is by healing those attachment wounds. So if you've been listening and you're ready, like many of you are, let me just write that here. Perfect. I am so overwhelmed with how many peeps are joining us on Saturday for the overview experience. If this is resonating with you and you're actually tired of talking about it and you're actually ready to do something about it, you can. The good news is you can. The overview experience is the best place to begin, and that's this Saturday at noon Pacific to 6 p.m. Pacific, so it's 3 to 9 Eastern time, and early Sunday morning in Australia and New Zealand. It's well worth it. It is like 10 years of therapy, 20 years of therapy in 5 hours, and I basically walk you through the process of healing those attachment wounds. And you do it in a beautiful container, and we do everything that I literally just shared with you. These are the steps. This is what we take our clients through, and yeah, this has been a long one. And it answers the other question, April, as well. How do I truly accept my past and not lie awake at night marinating in shame thinking about the past? How to not question every interaction with, did they think I was weird? Was that rude? Should I have said that or this or that? Unresolved attachment wounds. There is a disconnection you have, April, from yourself, and causing you to have no real definition and identity of who you are because of the trauma, because of all of those things. So the overview method, the overview experience is the step-by-step path I go through to help you resolve those things so that you can continue the work by yourself. Or if you feel inspired to have us help you afterwards and jump in and apply to have us really help you with that, because you're not going to be able to do it alone, because it involves going into some scary parts, and it doesn't involve going to a counselor and repeating your story week after week. So it takes a methodology to help you clear it, not just cognitively but in your body, and it's a practice that you can do, and when you do, you'll be able to sleep perfectly well. I was going to say sleep like a baby, but babies don't sleep so well. Sleep like a log, sleep like a bear, hibernating. That's what will happen, because the energy, the unresolved emotions have been processed through your body, and we teach you how to do that. It's stuck in your body. That's why you're in your mind going through what ifs and what ifs. It's because you have an alarm in the body that you haven't really learned how to move through your body. So healing that past isn't just a cognitive process that you do talk therapy on. It's a process that you must address from a body-based perspective, and that's why our methodologies are both top-down, bottom-up, because we do mindfulness stuff and then bodyfulness stuff. So you got to use both. How to work on the fear of abandonment. Okay, yeah, we got that. Raised by a narcissist. How do I learn to validate my own feelings when my own brain has trained to doubt my own existence? Great question. You gotta, it's through practice. After you do, for example, the overview experience, you've now made a connection to a younger part of you. Well, that's not the end of the work. That's just the beginning. You're called on to continuously, empathically communicate with those younger parts of you again and again and again. And within about 3 months to 6 months, that inner critic voice starts to change. You're far more compassionate to yourself. That's how you change the inner critic voice as well, is by healing those attachment wounds. And it's an ongoing process. In fact, I could be doing it as we speak, connected with my 2-year-old inner child who felt unseen, unheard. As I'm talking to you, I have him sitting on my lap. See, so he's in front of me. He's not in my blind spot anymore. Does that make sense? And so that becomes an ongoing process. Instead of learning the answer, it's wiser for you to learn the process. So I'm going to leave a link below. You got to make sure you jump in and join us if you feel inspired to be part of the conversation. There's many of you who are coming. You're in for a real treat. I can't wait to drop this stuff. Janine says, why are there so many people wanting to date, such as on dating apps, but no one seems to be finding long-term meaningful relationships. No one seems to be finding. I did. And what I want you to get is this concept in shadow work we have is that as within, so without. The lack of meaningful relationships externally is a reflection of the lack of a meaningful relationship that you have internally within yourself. And once you take care of that and really connect meaningfully with these parts of yourself that you've abandoned and disowned, all of a sudden you look around and you go, wow, there's meaningful relationships everywhere, right? So the conflict externally that I see is a reflection of the conflict internally. So if I just stop worrying about that for a minute and then focus on this, I now show up resourced and able to help a situation rather than add to the situation. Hopefully that makes sense. Why are there so many narcissists in the world? Yeah, I hope I answered that. If you just jumped on, make sure you go back. Unresolved trauma. There's narcissists and codependents. The two types in the two kind of the same coin. We're all covert narcissists in our own way. If you can't see it, then you are it. If you can't own it, then it's running you. And your healing, part of our healing is integrating our narcissistic parts of us, our needy parts of us that we all have. And why didn't we know when they were lurking? Because you were so insecure that you were so bought into every positive affirmation, positive regard, you were very vulnerable because of your insecurity. You didn't know because you're so insecure, you lost connection with that inner voice. You needed external validation. And somebody who is very keen on knowing how to meet your needs, you claim to be an empath. Well, that person is very empathic towards what your needs are and is able to say and do all the right things to just melt your heart based on your vulnerabilities, same way you're doing to them. And, you know, and then it's a perfect match. You're a perfect match because of your own insecurity. That's what it is. So healing involves dealing with your own insecurity. You want to change your relationship? Just go all in by healing your attachment wounds and resourcing your own insecurities, scarcities, and inadequacies. When you do, all of your relationships change. Every single relationship changes because the relationship within yourself feels different, right? So, yes, I didn't know the definition of the term until about a month ago. Since I was born, most relationships that I found, it's familiar to you. That's right. Narcissistic codependent relationship is just a repetition of your childhood relationship with parents that might have been overbearing and didn't consider your emotions and feelings. But spare the rod, spoil the child. Children are to be seen and not heard. Narcissistic parenting. So you become codependent or narcissist based on that, and that's how intergenerational trauma happens. The only people I'm interested in talking to are the ones that are wanting to, they have a story, but they're wanting to break free from the story instead of constantly get their story validated, kind of like narcissists love to do. Is it possible to be with narcissists that don't know they're narcissistic? Yes. They don't know. It's not something they choose. People who are behaving narcissistically, I mean, look at yourself. When you behave narcissistically, it's, when are you? Your nervous system is under distress. You don't feel worthy. You feel completely needy and lacking resource. So you see somebody, you spot somebody with certain vulnerabilities who who need validation. You give them the validation, and you get your needs met. So narcissism is an unconscious strategy to get your needs met. So is codependency. So it's unconscious. So that's why shadow work is so important in this process, because shadow work, as Carl Jung says, if until I make the unconscious conscious, it will rule my life. And until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you'll call it fate. So it's really important for you to make the unconscious conscious. So I got some good questions here. How do we handle a partner who can't communicate and shuts down is very silent? Ashley, great question. You're talking about stonewalling. And what happens is, if I'm in a relationship with you, in order for me to be able to communicate with you, I need to feel safe. I have to have emotional and psychological safety. So what happens is we'll get into conflict and I will say a truth of mine and then you will react and not hear me. And so I will either raise my voice and scream louder at you to be heard because you're clearly not hearing me, you're defending yourself, you're not listening. And either I'll scream back at you or based on my wounding, I'll just give up and shut down and stonewall. Stonewalling basically means I don't feel safe communicating myself to you. There is not, the container between us doesn't feel safe for me to express myself. So the way that you want to help that situation is not by being pushy, is by just saying, listen, I totally understand you don't feel safe expressing yourself. I can own why that is. Maybe I don't know if you've done the work or not, Ashley. If you're able to own why, once you've done the work, you're like, yeah, and here's why I haven't been able to have you feel safe. Be able to empathize with them, give empathy to them. Empathy and having them feel heard and understood relaxes their nervous system, lowers their ego defenses. And then as they're sharing, it's important to just listen and then say, okay, tell me more. Tell me more about that. And so unless you've been skilled in learning how to create emotional and psychological safety, you're going to take a conversation, get triggered, your ego will come up and you'll defend yourself. You'll say, no, I don't. What about you? You'll justify your behavior. You'll say, why are you always complaining? And then the person who just shared their feelings then says, fuck it. It's not safe to express myself. It's not going to, what's the point? I'm not going to be heard. You're just going to gaslight me anyway. So stonewalling is the natural, safest option when it's not safe to communicate with you. So in our programs, we teach you how to break down those walls. Your work basically in those moments is to lean into when you're being stonewalled. It's likely an old wound. It's probably your mother or father who stonewalled you, and your work is to heal the attachment wounds that have you reacting so horribly to somebody going quiet because they're having emotions. Just worked with a client yesterday and she was having really big emotions. She's a support worker for special needs kids, and when the special needs kids have like this big emotions, she loses her shit. And once we did a session, she realized, oh my god, this is my mother. When this person kind of like shuts down or has big emotions, she just wants to wring their neck, and she realized it was nothing to do with them. It was because when her mother had big emotions, she felt responsible and guilty, like she was bad and she was about to get punished. So the real response, I can tell you what to say to them, but that's only a band-aid solution. Your work is to heal the attachment trauma and wounds of what happens internally in your body whenever somebody kind of stonewalls you. And that's what we cover in all of our training. So it's funny because all of these questions, disclaimer, every single one of these questions is like, oh, the work we do solves that. It's all the same issues. Is this deep down wounded child within you that doesn't feel seen, heard, important, and is looking outside of them to get that fixed. And it's never going to be enough. No matter how much money you make, no matter how many women that you find, no matter how many boyfriends you get, how many people are asking you to marry them, or flashy cars, or whatever digits, figure, 7-figure, 8-figure, 9-figure, that doesn't solve it. And so, toxic relationships start to happen as a result. And so that was my life until I realized that I'm going to pause everything. And even though the work is hard, the alternative to doing this work is unbearable. The alternative is to keep living, carrying these unresolved wounds and having to be at the effect of them and separating myself from other people, finding myself feeling lonely, finding myself people not wanting to hang out with me. The only people who really wanted to hang out with me were the ones that I paid to hang out with me, my staff and my team, because myself, I wasn't showing up as a really safe and secure container, for secure relationships to thrive. And as I dove in, as I worked on learning the processes and mastering the frameworks of healing these attachment wounds, now I'm a magnet. I'm a magnet for abundance. I'm a magnet for love. I'm a magnet for connection. Friendships have gone through the roof in a good way. I have a beautiful family, a son who every time he looks at me is reflecting this big smile, this love that I have been giving myself. It's just the entire universe is just reflecting it back to me. Clients messaging me, I love you, man. Like my male clients who were dissociated, numbing and sedating themselves after a few months are like, I love you, man. These are clients who've paid me very well to work with them. They're like, I love you. You know what I mean? I hear I love you from my clients quite a bit, and it's pretty neat to do that. It's just, and I see it now is not because I'm so terrific. I'm no different. With what's within me is the same kind of magical spirit that's within you. We all have it, this divinity that's within us. It's just that I've been really working at removing the barriers between me and my divinity and allowing the divinity of myself to shine so that I can give my gifts to this world. And the world is reflecting back to me all of the love that I've been giving myself. And life has been a fantastic experience, and my relationship with my parents has never been better. And I love what I do, and I just love teaching this work. Um, but the only reason why I'm teaching it is because it's what I needed to learn. Because I was so disconnected a few years ago from people, myself, my purpose, abundance, relationships, family. And right now, I've never felt such a deep sense of love from my community, my family. Um, I just want to share this with people who are willing to stop the blame game and put up their hand and say, I want to be a cycle breaker. So for those of you who are resonating with that, I look forward to seeing you at the overview experience, or you just go ahead and you're ready to go all in. Submit an application if you're ready to invest in your future and your children's future and yourself, and create space and time to make your relationship with yourself the number one priority. Everything in your life comes on the other side. Everything in your life that you desire comes on the other side of making that a priority. So following the links below, I'll see you at the next perfect time.